It's hard, but it beats following an incompetent leader. Mm-hmm. How many times you work a job where you can do your boss's job?
All the time.
All the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Why is your boss working the job they're at, doing the job that they should not be doing?
Because they were rewarded a title.
Or they kiss ass.
They kiss ass.
Or maybe they just happen to know the right people.
They've been there for a long time, and it's the only thing left.
Or it could be colorism.
Colorism. Wow.
Yeah. It could be just systematic racism. And what are you going to do about that? Start your own company. Or deal with it long enough to, maybe go a different route, create some other opportunities for yourself.
Yeah.
Stocks, investments, strategy, stuff like that. But you have to ask yourself, is this path for me? You start a job somewhere and it's paying you well. What compromises do you make on yourself to keep that job?
Wow.
And those compromises add up over time. You find it, when I was in my 20s and 30s, I was a company man. But before you know it, you're kissing ass to keep that position that you have. You're no longer really effective. You're just a body. And then what does that do for you personally? How does that make you feel?
And what have we learned the most during this so-called pandemic about these major billion-dollar corporations? That they will save their own companies before they keep you.
Absolutely.
That is one thing that most of us should gather out of this so-called pandemic that we've been living in the past 4 years. Yeah. And speaking of that, like you had just mentioned and you expounded so profoundly on entrepreneurship, but I also heard you mention, other routes as far as investments in crypto and the stock market. And that's also something that we would like to share with you guys. So, the next question I'd have for you, Pa, is before we get into, investing, let's just go over living below your means. So how do we take that approach for the average person out there?
Well, all right. I'd have to put myself in the shoes of the average person. So let's think about the daily processes of an average person. Mm-hmm. Let's say they're not a student. Let's say they have income. They're working a pretty regular, steady job, maybe 20 to 40 plus hours a week. All right, so the average person might wake up and go to work, and then that's where, after work, they start engaging in activities. Liabilities. Yeah. Now, your activities could either be an asset or they could be a liability. Mm-hmm. So now let's define what is an asset. Something that generates money or value.
Mm-hmm. Passive income.
Active, maybe knowledge. Mm-hmm. Passive knowledge. Let's think about that too. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Obviously, it's mainly money. But liabilities, what do? Take your money, take your time, and take your knowledge.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
So the average Joe, let's say the average Joe comes home from work. Now it's based on what are we going to do today? You mentioned it. Activities. What activities consume a lot of your finances? Honestly, anything. It could be activities outside the house. It could be online shopping. Yeah. It could be food, anything. So how do you live below your means? One, you acknowledge that you need a budget.
Wow.
So you track your income, and then you track your expenses. Now, the expenses are necessary expenses. We focus on that first. What is the stuff that I have to pay every month?
Right.
January, February, March, April, May. I have to pay these things every month. Typically, for most people, it's rent, utilities, phone,
car notes,
exactly. So you take that into account. Then you recognize how much am I making and bringing in.
Right.
Assets, liabilities. You subtract those, and now you have a base amount that you can work with after each paycheck.
And what formula is that right there that you just mentioned?
You tell me.
Income to debt ratio.
So you calculate your income to debt ratio. And that surplus you have left over, that's going to determine
absolutely
the future that you have in life. So living below your means that you consciously decide, I'm not going to partake in these things that will cost or excessively cost money. Maybe some things you do will cost you money.
You're watching your savings grow.
You're watching your
purchasing power.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So you don't want to give up your money before you can even utilize your money.
Right.
So it's deciding to do things that might not be the most generic or common. Hey, you want to go out for drink? Nah, bro. I'm at the crib tonight, bro. Right. I'm working on this goal, this purpose I have.
Right. Yeah.
Bro, you trying to go to this shorty concert? Nigga, nah. I'm trying to post up here and I'll watch him on YouTube though.
That's right.
And speaking of going to concerts, and I'm not knocking anybody that's young and going to these different concerts, whether it be a Drake concert, a Beyonce concert, but just also understand that we're not supposed to be idolizing anybody in the flesh.
That's true.
Other than God Himself.
For sure.
How
shall not have other idols, right?
We shall not have other idols.
Right, for sure.
That is blasphemy.
That's part of the problem too.
That's
because
part of the problem.
we're idolizing people who are put in place to showcase wealth, to make you addicted to being a consumer.
Mm-hmm.
It works like that. And like we were talking the other day, a friend of mine, we were in Bellevue, and I'm saying to myself, wow, these people just spend every last damn dollar they got. We don't see real wealth in Bellevue. People have good jobs.
They have great jobs.
And that job is financing everything they have. And as soon as they lose that job, it could happen. Everything goes out the door. Talking about how there's not so many nice cars on the road like it used to be. Why? People get in cars repo, they lose their job. What can they do?
And that's at an all-time alarming rate high right now.
That old co-worker dude was getting paid almost $200,000 in Microsoft.
I believe.
Fired him.
Yes.
And then rehired him back as a contractor, making like $80.
No, that's tough.
And he took the job, didn't he?
He took the freaking job.
Because of his debt that he had. His house, his car, his student loan.
Yeah. And downsizing and everything else. Had a house way out east.
Yeah.
Now they're living in a condo.
Yeah,
so
is
it? Oh, okay.
Yeah. You know what's funny? If you were to lose your assets, your income, your liabilities are not going to stop.
Right.
No.
So it's very important to have general savings.
So is it important to say that we need to be able to maintain assets, right? Such as a savings account, right? Obviously, we know with inflation right now. So put it like this, right? Do you guys know how much the U.S. dollar is losing its value on an annual basis?
That's very important. Go ahead.
Is it
7%?
Yeah.
We are losing 7% of the U.S. dollar on an annual basis. Okay, so yes, it is very extremely intuitive to build your savings.
For the audience, give them some perspective.
Okay.
Since 2020, okay, a dollar being a dollar in 2020, how much is that dollar worth today?
It's worth 80 cents.
It's about 80 cents right now.
About 80
so
cents.
that means you have to do your due diligence. Importantly, yes, create the budget, manage your money, calculate your debt to income ratio, right? And then once you have excess funds available after living below your means, you need to set aside a certain amount of money that's going to be different between me, between Jason, between Paul, and between the millions of followers who's watching this video. You have to create your own budget and how much you're willing to put off your liabilities to the side and save. So once you build a little bit of a savings net, because you got to keep in mind, if you're just throwing money into that savings account, it's losing 7% on an annual basis of its value on a yearly basis. So once you have your savings, you have a little bit of a cushion, for your emergency fund. So just in case if you do lose your job, because for the 99 percentile of the population, we depend on our employer for our active income. So what happens if you strip the active income from the average person? Yeah. Especially if they haven't done their due diligence and created their emergency fund. They're desperate. Yeah. And what happens when you're desperate? You turn to fear, and that's when the devil's just sitting there with his contract, like, "Got you, buddy. So you ready to sign this paperwork?" No, you avoid all of that by doing your own due diligence, having self-discipline, having reliance, having perseverance with your funds, have your emergency fund built, and then once you can create your emergency fund, whether it be 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses, like I said, it's going to be different per person, then you can start to branch out to investing your money, because at the end of the day, like we all are aware of during this so-called pandemic, we cannot rely on an active income, right? Jason had just mentioned that he was working with a fellow client or colleague that was making well over $200,000 a year. I'm sure, his mindset was, hey, man, I just got this white collar job with Microsoft. I'm good. I'm making $200,000. So let me go ahead and buy this nice Mercedes AMG GT. You know what I'm saying? And shout out to Mercedes, because that is the only Mercedes I would buy. But I also understand it is a liability.
It's an AMG, right?
Yeah. So back to what I was getting at, right? So that fellow probably bought a nice vehicle, probably purchased a house for, $1 million with that 8% 30-year fixed mortgage rate. yeah, man, he's going to depend on that job. He's going to slave himself to his employer to keep up with his assets and liabilities and his expenses.
Yeah.
So with that being said, after you build your emergency fund, you have to then start to branch out to invest in your money, and obviously that's going to come with a lot of research because like Paul had mentioned, he is not a financial expert, nor am I I'm not a financial advisor per se. I'm not a certified financial advisor.
You're pretty damn good, brother.
I appreciate it, but I'm just here to give out just general knowledge, man, just to to help the masses out there, man. Just hidden knowledge, hidden gems that's not being reciprocated